Lesson today is taken from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 9, verses 38 through 50. John said to him, "Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he was not following us." But Jesus said, "Do not stop him, for no one who does a deed of power in my name will be able soon afterward to speak evil of me. Whoever is not against us is for us. For truly I tell you, whoever gives you a cup of water to drink because you bear the name of Christ will by no means lose the reward. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were hung around your neck and you were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than to have two hands and to go to hell, to the unquenchable fire. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life lame than to have 2 feet and to be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into hell, where their worm never dies and the fire is never quenched. For everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its saltiness, how can you season it? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another." Well, one of the things that I often mention right about the Bible is when they start warning you about things, they're warning you because it's happening. I mean, when you prohibit something, someone is doing it. If no one does it, there's no need to prohibit. No one ever, I had to Photoshop this because no one has ever needed a sign in their refrigerator warning their children not to touch the veggies before dinner. Okay, you don't need to do this. You never have to do this. You never have to warn your kids to do this. You never have to say, okay, don't touch the veggies. The donuts on the top shelf are fine. Those are fair game, but don't touch the veggies. You never need to do this because they wouldn't. So when Jesus sits there and he says, if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones, it would be better for you if a great millstone were hung around your neck. I read this, and what I imagine first is the question, why would someone do this? Why would someone put a stumbling block in front of a little one? And traditionally, the understanding of little one is someone who is new to the faith, okay, that they were little ones in faith. And so why would the followers of Jesus want to put a stumbling block before the little ones? I mean, why would someone do this? All right? And clearly they are, or else you wouldn't need the prohibition, especially a prohibition that's given in such stark, harsh language. You wouldn't need it unless people were doing it. And I think if you think about how this happens and what you see in the world, the answer is that it's something going on inside of the person. All right? It's their ego. It's their pride. It's their bitterness. It's their desire to show superiority. I mean, not like that's never happened in churches, right? Where the people who've been there a while need to kind of assert the fact that, hey, you know, I've been here a long time. You're new, okay? All right. There's never been a church, right, that ever made newcomers feel uncomfortable on that basis, right? That's never happened. We would never, ever do that. And sometimes we think we're doing it for a good reason. We know best. We know best. We know better than you. And so I'm going to put that stumbling block there, you know, for your own good. I'm just going to do it for your own good. All right? So that's just ego operating when you don't realize it's your ego operating. Okay? You don't understand. You're not willing to admit that that's the case. But you feel this need to make it clear, we outrank you. And that's what happens. And so Jesus gives us this very harsh language where he says, you know, if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out. Now, this is not literal, or else the early church would have been known as that group of very weird, one-eyed, one-armed people, okay? And so obviously, who hop around on one leg, all right? So clearly, this was never something that was taken literally. This was just clearly hyperbole. No one did it. There are no records of the early Christians engaging in self-mutilation or amputation. Do not try this at home. It's not literal. It's just Jesus trying to make a point, okay? They never did this. But you'll notice that the thing that Jesus does do that's important is he has turned around this issue of who is stumbling so that the people who were putting a stumbling block in front of others are actually the ones who stumbled. See, if your eye causes you to stumble, if your hand causes you to stumble, all right? So suddenly his metaphor shifts 180 degrees in here from warning people against putting a stumbling block in front of other people to talking about you stumbling, because what he's telling us, which is an important reminder, is that causing someone else to stumble is our problem. We're stumbling. If we want someone else to stumble, that's our problem. We're stumbling. All right? If we cause stumbling to happen in others, that is a fault within ourselves, because the ego, the pride, the need to be superior, all of those things that might cause us to put a stumbling block in front of others is actually something that is causing us to stumble within ourselves. It is our need for power. It is our need for control. And there's something going on there that's often operating at a pretty deep level. Operating at such a deep level that it feels like an integral part of ourselves, and that's why we don't want to let go of it. That's why we don't want to let go of it. The root cause that's driving us to not do right by others is often so deeply intertwined with our identity, our sense of who we are, that we feel like if we change that, we're going to lose a part of what makes us us, okay? Because those things all kind of come together. I know I have wrestled with these kinds of things so often in my life, because you sit there, they always talk about traits that have, a positive attribute and like a shadow side to that attribute, all right? And so you often see these things working together, and you see these things for both the good and the bad, that it feels like if I take that thing out of me, I'm going to lose something that makes me me. All right? Example, being competitive. All right? If I have a drive to win, and I really do, I love winning, okay, but it's not really a great trait, except that I'm afraid that if I lose that, am I still going to work as hard? Am I still going to strive? All right? Okay? And so you feel like, hey, I may lose something that I consider to be a valuable part of my identity, even though it stems from something that isn't really healthy. And that's why it feels like you're going to amputate a part of your psychological being as you strive to be people who do things the way and approach the world the way Jesus would have us approach the world. Because there are so many of those negative traits within us that also produce some positive results. And they go together in a way that makes us feel like I don't really want to let go of it, because I don't want to let go of the things I use it for. And so what happens is we can cover it up. And so Jesus ends with this another metaphor shift where he says salt is good, but if salt has lost its saltiness, how can you season it? And remember, I mention this every single time this comes up, because there's always somebody who forgets that what salt was in that time. Because we all know, right, in the modern age, you have that container of Morton's on the shelf, and you know that it never goes bad, right? So that container of Morton's on the shelf, you don't look for an expiration date on it. You don't sit there and go, is there a Best Buy on this salt? No, it's just going to be good. But that's because it's pure, all right? So in that day, the salt that they had, like you've always heard about like salt mines and stuff like that, the salt that they had was impure. It was mixed with other minerals. And so those other minerals that it's mixed with are not water soluble, but of course the salt is extremely soluble. So in a climate with a lot of humidity and stuff like that, and containers that weren't, Tupperware hadn't been invented yet, and I just mentioned that because they went under. But so Tupperware has come and gone in between the time of Jesus and now. And so the salt, the water, any kind of humidity would cause the salt to leach away, and it would leave only the mineral impurities behind. But of course, those mineral impurities had no flavor to them. They had no function to them, all right? And so that's how salt would lose its saltiness. You could have a container that you thought had salt at one point, and then you taste it, and there's no saltiness to it because the actual salt had leached away through humidity. So the residue would look like salt, but there was nothing that was actually there. And that often happens to us, in certain aspects of our lives. So I'd ask the question, when are we just faking it? When are we just a facade? Like, I always wonder about that. You watch the Oscars, and they show all the nominees, and then they announce the winner, and you see the ones who didn't win, and they put on that smile, and they're applauding. You ever wonder, what's the thought bubble over their head? You ever wonder how many of them are just faking it, and how many of them are genuinely happy for the person who won? And you don't know, okay? You just really don't know what's going on inside of them. Are they really okay, or are they mad? All right? And whether they're genuinely okay or not matters. It matters. Because when you're genuinely okay, when it's not just a facade, when you actually are salt inside, you're at peace. A couple years ago, I did a whole thing on salt. So I'm not going to subject you to the whole thing, just going to cut to the chase. But years ago, when I was first learning how to bake, I was trying to figure out why it is that you put salt in like brownies and cookies and stuff like that. And I looked it up, and I found out that the issue is that salt actually suppresses bitterness in flavors. So you've got your basic flavors, and salt actually suppresses bitterness. And I'm not saying that Jesus, was like trying out for Top Chef when he used this metaphor, but I just thought that it was interesting that in actual baking, in actual cuisine, salt suppresses bitterness. So you add a little bit of salt to like chocolate brownies because, chocolate, especially dark chocolate, has bitterness to it, and the salt suppresses the bitterness and allows the sweetness to shine through. And I've always thought about salt using that metaphor ever since, that when Jesus talks about having salt and being salt, that it suppresses the bitterness inside of you. To be salt suppresses the bitterness that's kind of naturally there in a lot of us, or normally there in a lot of us. And when you do that, then you are in fact at peace with one another. You're not the person sitting there who just lost the award and you smile and you're faking it and you pretend like you're happy for the other person. You genuinely are happy for the other person. You genuinely are happy that someone else won. And then that is the basis of true peace, when you are genuinely happy for the well-being of others. All right? And what Jesus is telling us, by the way, when he says this, to have that salt, to be at peace, he's reminding us that peace is supposed to be our natural state. When we're whole, we're at peace with others. Those things that operate within us that cause us to not be at peace with others is not our natural state. It's a corruption of our natural state. All of the disharmony that we cause in the world, those stumbling blocks that we put in the place of others, is not what we were created to be. That is not who God made us to be. See, our natural state, which is different from our normal state, our actual natural state is to be good, because that's how we were created, right? God creates us. God creates people in God's image, and we're good. At that moment, Adam and Eve, right, they're good. The natural state of humanity is to be people who are in the image of God and are therefore good. It is our natural state that has been corrupted to the point where our normal way of existing is a corruption of our original intended natural state. And of course, we never fully achieve that natural state in our lifetime. The corruption is so thorough, the corruption is so complete that we don't naturally, we don't achieve that natural state with which we were created, but that is what we are always striving for. Whenever we mess up, one of the phrases, and I've mentioned this before, one of the phrases I really dislike is when somebody messes up and they go, "Don't worry, you're only human." I don't like it because I don't like the implication that our humanity is less. Okay? I mean, it's one thing to make an innocent mistake. That's fine. That should never be criticized, all right? But when you're not at peace with one another, when your ego is driving you, all right, when you're actually so angry that you're wishing harm on someone else or anything like that, that's not being human. That's actually corrupting the humanity with which God created you. God created you to not be in that state. God created you to not think that way about others. God created you to not be prejudiced against others. God created you to live in harmony with everyone. God created you to want the best for everyone. That's the natural state that we strive to achieve. All right. And when we fail to achieve it, we're not being more human, we're being less human. Humanity in its fullness is what we will experience when we are with God. And that humanity in its fullness is a humanity that is at peace with one another. That humanity in its fullness is a humanity that strives, to see the best for everyone. All right? And our job is to encourage one another to be more fully human. Because when we're fully human, we fully experience life as God intended us to experience it. And so Jesus says, look, whoever gives you a cup of water because you bear the name of Christ will by no means lose the reward. All right? When we remove from us whatever corrupted us, whatever led us to be bitter, whatever led us to want others to stumble, it freed us to lend a hand to others. It freed us to encourage others. It freed us to help others be who they should be, because that is what it is for us to be who we can be. We're supposed to be people who are encouraging others to be the best possible version of themselves, the most human version of themselves, which is the most loving version of yourself. When you are the most loving person you can be, you are being more human, not less. When you are more at peace with one another, more accepting of others, more appreciative of the wondrous diversity with which we were all created, all of those things make you more human, not less. And our job as a community of faith is to encourage and support one another on that journey. And even the littlest gesture in that regard matters. When Jesus says, even a cup of water, it matters. Because I've also said this before, but I think it's an important reminder. Many of us have been scarred by one thing someone said. All right, a lot of us have carried scars for years or decades because of one thing someone said that somehow stuck and stayed with us. From someone who really shouldn't have mattered that much, maybe from someone who doesn't even remember they said it to us, but it stuck and it scarred us. And on the flip side, some of us have embarked on a journey of trying something new and loving it, and maybe it became a hobby or even a vocation, even a career that we went on just because one person encouraged us along the way. Sometimes all it takes, maybe you were a little kid and you did something and someone said, "Oh man, you're really good at that." And you remembered that. And it stuck with you, and it affected you, and it impacted you, and it changed your opinion of yourself. And ever since that moment, whether you were 7 years old or 9 years old or 11 years old, whatever it was, ever since that person said that to you, you've had that running in the back of your mind. Yeah, I'm good at that. I'm good at that. And what that person gave you was that cup of cold water that made all the difference in the world in your life. So we encourage one another and we support one another because it does make a difference. We encourage one another, we support one another, we encourage one another to get better, to be better, because in so doing, we both become the people that God meant us to be. So we need to do the hard work, the courageous work of letting go of those parts of us that keep us from being encouragers, that keep us from supporting others. Because when we do that, when we put that stumbling block in front of others, that's something operating inside of us that we need to let go of. And no matter how hard it is, no matter how scary it is, we let go of it. And then we can be who God called us to be. Amen.